I loved the movie, guys. I thought it was
Oh
fantastic.
man, thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
to begin with, I'll start with you, Alex, because to begin with, I kind of admired your character a little bit. I mean, I'm not sure if it was him like ripping a bong from his bed at his mum's house that did it, but he sort of has this quite infectious charisma, and he's one of those people who just kind of just does what he wants without care. And I just think deep down, there's a tiny bit in all of us who wishes we had more elements of that. I just wondered with that in mind, was it quite a liberating character to play, to kind of fulfill some of those kind of innate desires that we all have?
Yeah, that's a great first question because I think that is exactly what I'd say. I'd say there was something liberating about freeing up a part of yourself that you keep locked away in a cage, especially, where I grew up and how I grew up. It was all about inclusivity and love and warmth and kind of abandoning all these maybe toxic, antiquated ideas of what it is to be a man or what it is to be, a proper, mature, empathetic adult. There's also something inside us that is primal and uh, sometimes a little darker and a little something that we keep in the shadows. So I feel like this character was a way of freeing that up. And yeah, with that comes sort of a braggadocio, sort of a smirk, a southern charm. Uh, so yeah, it's liberating, but it was also upsetting, to go against your own moral compass, and at times to be a coward, as someone who can't quite muster up the gall to actually put a stop to what's going on, actually, make your voice heard that these things are icky and these things are illegal and these things are gross and being still beholden to these old-fashioned American traditions and not really taking seriously what your own moral compass is. I think that was also disturbing. So it was both. It was right on the line. That's the pun, but I that's what I took the movie as. I'm not just being cute when I say that. I think that is what I saw as Tom. Why I loved him as a character is he's right on the line of a lot of things. I think he is a composite of a lot of different men in the world, maybe all men at this age, where you don't really know who you are and you're kind of pulling together scraps of what you think, you're the idea of yourself and the idea of what the whatever masculinity is. You kind of cling to some idea in your head. And I think that I said this to Ethan, but there's a character in the movie who says to Tom, he says, you're a phony. And that's kind of true. He's kind of pretending to be on both sides. And I think by the end of the movie, he sort of settles in. But yeah, sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's a really loaded, deep question.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Tom is like playing a part to fit in because he is 18, 19, and there's something
It
really relatable about that, but also impressionable.
Yeah, yeah, because Ethan obviously get involved, obviously, in the kind of right from the kind of beginning of this kind of project. Like, how, in terms of it coming from a kind of place of truth, like, can you relate to that kind of character, and then just in men, not obviously not the actions of kind of what we kind of see, but kind of trying to discover at that quite formative part of your life, what it is to be a man and the kind of pressures from society upon you, and then kind of trying to navigate your way through what is quite a complex kind of few years in your life, I suppose.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's like, yeah, and I feel like, um, I feel like we can all relate to this like feeling of our like loyalty and morality kind of being at odds and like this like tendency for people to like use their own trauma to justify inflicting it onto somebody else, or just like the way men measure their masculinity by how much trauma they can endure, which is like I feel like hazing is another example of, um, and it's like, why have we accepted that as the norm?
Mm.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
Yeah, because I mean, this was kind of, I mean, obviously, maybe coming at it quite naively as a kind of British person, because we have quite different kind of college and university culture. But I've only ever really seen kind of frat houses and the kind of fraternity brothers and stuff kind of in movies, and never quite as raw as I have in The Line. But I've seen it kind of appear in lots of kind of college films across the years. And I sort of, for me, it felt like a cinematic device, like a trope. I can't, and I sort of did some research off the back of this and read about how real some of this is. So this is quite a
Yeah.
kind of big question, but why do you think this still, because it feels quite old fashioned, it doesn't really feel like it's in line with the kind of actually where modern society is going. So why do you think the kind of hazing and this kind of fraternity culture is still so prevalent in the US?
Because I think that that's where a lot of our politicians and CEOs come from. And like, I think that the fraternities have a lot of donor money and are able to remain on campuses because universities are worried about the impact that will have on their finances. Um, and they're quite antiquated, they're segregated generally, and yet we can all relate to the idea of wanting to fit in.
Mm. Yeah, and Alice, I'll come to you next because I mean, there's some great sort of performances in this. I mean, you're fantastic in this, but obviously there's obviously the likes of Halle, there's the likes of Bo as well, but there's obviously some really established kind of like quality in there as well in the likes of Scoot McNairy and kind of John Malkovich. How much easier does it make your kind of both of your lives, I suppose, when you're dealing with actors of that kind of caliber? And as a kind of part two to this question, Ethan, how did John Malkovich come to be involved in this project?
Well, John, I've always said that you can't boil down your favorite actors, but I've always said that two of my favorite actors were Nick Cage and John Malkovich since I was a kid. I saw John Malkovich in Death of a Salesman playing Biff when I was 13 or 14, and I said that's my favorite performance of all time. And so there was a degree of intimidation, but the thing about John is every role he plays is the same importance to him. It's not like he kind of will do the lead in something and then he'll do a favor and kind of, not give his heart. Every role he has just really dug into the marrow of what it is that makes that character move forward. And one of the funny stories was I remember the first day I was so nervous. I was just kind of staying in my Southern accent. It was like in the first 3 days. And I was talking to him and he was being really sweet. He could see my hands were shaking and I was nervous. And he said, so where in the South are you from? And I was like, well, I'm actually from New York. And I kind of, and then, it was, he buys in as much as everybody else. We were all kind of buying into the world of it. And I think he could see what an unbelievable talent we have in Ethan. And that Ethan had never made a movie, but he had such a clear vision and such a clear knowledge and sensitivity towards the subject that I think John took it extremely seriously and saw it as a small part, but one that was sort of vital to the message of the film. So working with John was an amazing experience. And same with Scoot. Scoot and I, the thing about John is that you had Mr. John Malkovich. You have, these two kind of brief scenes where we really got to act, but Scoot and I had like what it was started as like a 14-minute scene, back and forth. And I think that was one of the more intense days of my life doing that with Scoot. And yeah,
I have an amazing story about that Scoot scene, which is when we were shooting the two of them. I looked to my left and saw Austin Abrams and Lewis Pullman walking in to watch the scene on their off day because they just wanted to see Alex and Scoot work. And that was really inspiring to just see them there. And Alex, there's so much like emotional weight in an expression with Alex. I mean, granted, I've never made a movie. It's like working with somebody like him makes your life exponentially easier. Like when you have somebody as invested as him to set the tone, it's much like, I don't know, people get excited to like be there. And I feel like, you know, John ended up, I have a friendship with John. I sent him the script. I told him that Alex was going to be in it, and he was down to do it. So.
Oh, it's an amazing ensemble here. But I've only got time for one very quick question before I have to go. But why did you guys choose Blue by Eiffel 65? And do you think you can ever listen to that song ever again?
No, the reason I chose it was because when I went to college at Wesleyan, I lived next to a fraternity, and during Hell Week, which is the week where the pledges have to live at the house the entire week, they played Blue on repeat the entire 7 days. So we would hear it, and it's like a Guantanamo style, like, and so that's why I chose it, because from this real experience I'd had observing it being used in a fraternity. And I mean, yeah, sure, I actually do want to listen to it again, because I'm grateful to them for giving us the song.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I watched Anatomy of a Fall, that kind of like steel drum PIMP version. It's that kind of like, you just feel, I need a break from that for a little while. Anyway, I thought it was great, and I thought you both did such a good job. It was a pleasure to speak to you. So best of luck with the release of the movie.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you.
Cheers. Take care. Bye-bye. Cheers.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey, you guys!
Hey you guys.
Hey, that's what they all say.
Hey you guys.
Hey, you guys!